YouTube, and if you didn't know it yet, you need to know it now. The beast system wants to eat you. Literally. Back in 2014, I did a video that's since been blocked and removed from YouTube called An Epidemic of Bestiality and Cannibalism, because I was seeing that trend back then. Now, in the 3 years since that video, it's really blowing up. We're seeing cannibalism in all forms of popular entertainment and also in the news. I believe there's a reason for this. It's predictive programming. We're living at a time where they're trying to normalize the most debaucherous of behaviors. So before I show you the way they're conditioning us nowadays for this sick behavior, I want to cover some really odd cases of cannibalism. Many of these you've probably never even heard of, and these are scattered throughout history, to show you how this has been with us really all along. Cannibalism has actually been with us since the beginning. Even going back to the Bible, we find instances of cannibalism. After the global flood, God gave Noah permission to eat meat. He said, "Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything." However, God specifies that the food for you does not include fellow human beings. People are treated much differently from animals. It says, "Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, for the image of God has God made mankind." Cannibalism is mentioned several times in Scripture, but in each case the practice is regarded as a horrible curse and an inhuman act of desperation. Moses and other prophets predicted that if the Israelites forsook God, that they would fall into such awful degradation as to cannibalize their own children. Cannibalism has also been ritualized in some pagan cultures as part of a religious ceremony or cultural superstition. And of course, also connected to cannibalism in the Bible of children, we have the horrific practice of child sacrifice found there as well. It's been committed throughout the world for thousands of years. Generally, the sacrifice of a child was intertwined with the worship of a pagan deity, or often a fertility god. So even as cannibalism has been with us since the beginning, and we're still seeing it now, the same thing applies to this idea of child sacrifice. We find many stories connecting Wiccan and pagan worship inside abortion clinics. It's just like we're told in Ecclesiastes that there's nothing new under the sun. Everything works in cycles. So as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be near the end. So I want to go through some of the history of how people have been eating each other for many, many years. The truth about cannibalism and its practice is far more common than you might think. In fact, people have been eating people for centuries. You may call it medical cannibalism or even medical vampirism. It's been practiced for centuries by royals, by some religious communities, and by many common people. They've all practiced this medical cannibalism without shame, believing that it was for the greater good. Take mummy dust, for instance. In the Middle Ages, mummy dust was a popular drug throughout Europe. Mummies or mummy dust was imported from Egypt. The dead bodies were crushed into a powder. When eaten, the powder was believed to cure a great number of health issues, such as rashes, constipation, and paralysis. Groups of people within the Middle East mixed the mummy dust with butter and took it as medicine well into the 1800s. The use of mummies became so prolific that the Egyptian government finally passed laws about selling off mummified relatives to merchants. And then there's gladiator blood. Gladiators in ancient Rome lived brutal and very short lives. They fought in the arenas to the jeers and the cheers of the crowds who wanted little more than to see the gladiators' gruesome death. However, some people who attended the gladiator events were there to capture the blood of these slain gladiators. These spectators believed that if they would drink the blood of strong, slain men, that they could absorb the gladiators' vitality and gain some of their strength. It's very similar to the way that vampires are said to be renewed after drinking human blood. Besides consuming crushed human skulls, the people of medieval times also ate the lichen that grew on the skulls of the dead, or the moss. According to their lore, you needed to gather the skull moss, called usnea, from the skulls of dead soldiers. And this was scraped off the skulls, dried, and powdered. Then it was made into tinctures and taken as a magical cure for wounds. Much of the medicine from medieval times relied on sympathetic magic. For example, powdered heart was consumed to fix heart problems. Blood symbolized life and renewal, so it was also consumed in hopes of renewing the body. In this case, the moss from the skull was taken from soldiers. Although the soldiers may have died from the wounds they received in battle, this moss from their skulls was believed to magically cure very serious wounds. According to a recipe written in the 17th century by Johann Schroeder, a German pharmacologist, you need the body of a, quote, reddish man who died a violent death to cure whatever is ailing you. The body has to lie in the moonlight for 1 full day and 1 full night before you cut the meat off of his bones. The man meat was covered in myrrh and aloe and then soaked in wine for a few days. After the man was thoroughly marinated, the meat strips would be hung out to cure before eating. You may have heard of something called the King's Drops. It was something that Charles II of England took to keep himself well. The recipe cost the king a whopping £6,000 at the time, and it included a process to distill human skulls into a tincture. The skulls used for the tincture came from grave diggers who dug up the bones in Ireland. The skulls were crushed and made into an alcoholic mixture that Charles II frequently drank. Even back in the 15th century, people were concerned with finding ways to renew their youth. The desire to be young again has led to some really crazy remedies throughout history. So back in the 15th century, an Italian priest named Marsilio Ficino recommended drinking blood to overcome the effects of old age. He stated that the elderly could regain their youth by drinking the fresh blood of a young person who died healthy. The young person should have been relatively happy during life and should have lived excessively. The blood had to be harvested from the recent dead and not from a corpse that has been lying about getting ripe. This form of medical vampirism has been revisited repeatedly over the centuries, sometimes as a cure for old age and other times as a cure for consumption. There's a case where a father was told that if he mixed the crushed human skull of a young woman with molasses and fed it to his epileptic daughter, that she would be cured. The man did as he was told and fed his daughter the gruesome mixture. Ultimately, he reported that it had no effect upon his daughter's epilepsy, and this happened back in 1847. And speaking of epilepsy, in Denmark, when they were doing public beheadings, epileptics often stood at the scaffold with cups in their hand, waiting to capture the blood spurting from the condemned. They believed that the blood from a life cut short would cure them of their epilepsy. So we've established this idea throughout history of drinking the blood of the young. By drinking blood from the young people in the past, they believed that they would gain all the years that the young person was deprived of. Now, that's why the blood of the old was worthless in magical and medicinal cures. There were not enough years left in the blood of the elderly to make a difference to the person drinking the blood, and this was their reasoning. Of course, drinking the blood of the young did not make a lick of difference when you were on your deathbed. Take, for instance, Pope Innocent VIII. As he was dying in 1492, the doctors took 3 young boys and bled them to death to save the Pope's life. The Pope drank their blood as medicine and still died. The human heart has around 720 calories, more calories than a 285-gram, 10-ounce steak from a cow. For that reason, there are anthropologists who believe that people turn to cannibalism for their body's caloric needs. Calories and the need to eat did not figure into medical cannibalism. The need to consume certain body parts was based on superstitions. The heart, for example, represented strength and symbology. Therefore, if a patient ate a human heart, he would gain strength from it. One particular preacher, Breton John K-ROC, wrote a recipe for pulverized human heart in the 1700s. The purpose of the medicine was to get rid of dizziness and therefore improve the body's strength. Patients were told to take the heart medicine in the mornings on an empty stomach. And that brings us up to modern times. This is a screenshot from a new television series on Netflix called The Santa Clarita Diet. It's all about a young, attractive, wealthy family in Santa Clarita, California that happen to be cannibals. So this whole practice of cannibalism is crude, primitive, it's barbaric, and yes, it's still happening in the United States and Britain. The medical industry in the USA harvests organs and body parts regularly from aborted fetuses. I'm an ex-film student and my major was screenwriting. I've always been kind of a movie geek and I like the independent movies. And of course this whole study of cannibalism in our culture reminds me of this movie Raw. Just came out recently over the last few months, and just receiving nothing but praise and love all over the place, even won a lot of awards. It's basically about a girl that's a vegetarian that through certain hazing rituals at her school develops a taste for flesh and becomes a full-blown cannibal. Once again, if you look this up and look up the reviews, this is a movie it's acclaimed. The people love it. They applaud it. It's just another way, as far as I'm concerned, that we're all being conditioned to accept this as something cool, something edgy, something acceptable. And I thought this is very interesting as well, because oftentimes the beast sends us subliminals. This is the way we're programmed, predictive programming and social engineering. And even with candy, there's a new type of caramel M&M with a sinister cannibalistic detail on the packet. And here's the picture I'm talking about. Keeping in mind that M&Ms in commercials they're portrayed as sentient beings. They talk with each other, they interact. So keeping that in mind, here's two M&Ms, a yellow and a red, literally ripping another one into pieces. And of course I find it interesting we're finding all this cannibalistic stuff in our culture now, in popular entertainment and even on your candy. All in the wake of the revelation of spirit cooking. Most of you watching this video are already familiar with the subject. If it's new to you, please look into it. All of this really came to light through WikiLeaks and the Podesta emails. People online started investigating, and next thing you know, this story really blew up. That's Marina Abramovic. I believe she's a witch to politicians and to the Hollywood elite. She does a lot of these presentations. She calls it spirit cooking. And as you can see, it's cannibalistic in nature. And that's Lady Gaga there next to her. Ever since this broke, we're seeing more and more cannibalism coming up in our popular culture. I've mentioned this in the past, but what we're dealing with is revelation of the method. We're also dealing with people like myself who are wide awake and aware to a lot of these things, and we're trying to reveal this also. It's a battle. On one side, we're trying to shine the light on the darkness of these things that are starting to happen and come out, the veil's being lifted. But on their end, they want it all to come out anyway, but they want it to be packaged the way they want it to be presented. They want people to accept this. This beast system wants you to accept cannibalism, which finally brings us to this later incarnation of this idea, and this is from Katy Perry and her new song Bon Appetit. And in her music video, she's literally being cooked and eaten. Katy Perry has been a tool of that satanic beast system, Hollywood system, for a very long time. You can see it in her public performances. These are rituals being played out before millions of people. So more and more they're normalizing this idea, and you can see it right here. Meanwhile, this is a very serious and current issue. There's children in Uganda that are being kidnapped, mutilated, murdered, and cannibalized to give power, potency, prosperity, and protection. Westerners promote abortion because the family can't afford another child. By saving money, they attain prosperity, protection, and power. By having sex unencumbered by babies, the man and woman also achieve the other aim of the superstitious, which is increased sexual potency and pleasure. The occult practitioner, whether he's an African, a pre-Columbian South American, an ancient worshipper of Moloch, a Chinese businessman, or even a Korean drug smuggler, they all want the 5 Ps from this cannibalism, and that's protection, prosperity, potency, pleasure, and power. So I'll leave you with that. The beast system wants to eat you. They are normalizing the most degrading and disgusting things right now in our culture and all around the world. So thank you for checking out the video. Stay aware out there, take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you real soon.